We're gonna take our time, slow down and design. Yeah.
This presentation I'm going to give an overview of our climate and landscape, and many of the problems that we face in our island nation are similar to the ones that Cuba faces, but we have some additional ones which I'll talk about briefly. But then I want to focus on solutions, and it's not possible to tell you everything that's happening in New Zealand in the permaculture world. There's far too much going on. But I've chosen 2 projects to talk about. In times of crisis, there are many opportunities open up. And I'm happy to say that in New Zealand, permaculturists are rising to the challenge, and they're grappling with the issues, and they're coming up with solutions. So I want to talk about one project that I'm involved with to do with waste education and resource recovery. And then I want to talk about compost toilets in an earthquake zone. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Daniel Tohill. He's going to talk about a project he's been involved with, permaculture in schools, and then 2 broad-scale permaculture projects. And finally, my other colleague, Robina McCurdy, will be talking about community food resilience throughout New Zealand. So, to start, there we are, way down in the South Pacific. Our nearest neighbour to the south is Antarctica. We're a long way from anywhere. New Zealand was the last major landmass to be settled by human beings in about 1250, 1300 AD. We have a wide range of climate zones. In the north, of course, it's warm, almost subtropical. Then we have our warm temperate climate, and then right down at the south, cold temperate. New Zealand was settled by Maori explorers from eastern Polynesia, and they named the country Aotearoa, land of the long white cloud. They were incredible navigators. They navigated that immense Pacific Ocean just by using the stars. So if you turn our country upside down and overlay it over Europe, you can see the wide range of climate zones we have, and it's a maritime climate, so it's all moderated by the sea. When the Maori arrived in New Zealand, it was almost entirely forested back in the 1300. And this is a picture of the pre-human forest cover of New Zealand, very similar to Cuba. And there was vast tracts of land were deforested by believed to be Maori hunting fires gone out of control. So by the time the British or the European colonists arrived in the 1840s, there was very little of our original forest cover left. Now, we were one of those countries that Andy was talking about. We were colonised by Britain. So those European colonists cleared vast areas of land to create pasture for sheep and cattle. And initially, agriculture created great prosperity for our country. But it had its downside. With so much deforestation, of course, there was erosion. And they say that vast areas of soil in New Zealand were washed out to sea. So whilst there's many examples of good farming practices in New Zealand, there's also the bad ones, with over-nutrification of our waterways. Some of our lakes and rivers are in crisis. And our economy is still today heavily dependent on the export of meat, dairy and horticultural products. Tourism is also one of our biggest industries, but it's basically we still rely on agriculture. And agriculture is highly dependent on the import of oil and in particular of phosphate. New Zealand imports 1.2 million tonnes of phosphate per year for our soil fertility to grow all that beef and lamb and milk. So you can imagine how vulnerable we will be in times of peak oil and climate change. Our remoteness it makes us very vulnerable. We are so far away from the rest of the world. And like everywhere else, we are experiencing extremes of climate. We're having droughts, we're having floods. This is a picture taken in the road where I live. And along our coastal areas, also, they're very vulnerable. Local councils are putting in place new planning rules to do with inundation so that people don't build houses so close to the sea. That's enough of the bad news. Now I want to focus on the good news, what permaculturists are doing to build resilient communities. Food security. Community gardens are a hot topic. Community gardens are springing up all over the country. There's over 50 in Auckland City alone. And school gardens. And I'm going to leave that for Daniel to talk about. He's been involved with a big project there. And food forests. So there's an awareness growing of just how vulnerable we are. And as I said earlier, permaculturists are grappling with the issues and coming up with solutions. So community gardens are springing up from small ones like this to larger ones where people come together to learn, relax, meet other people, share, be inspired to grow their own food. People are enjoying working together. And again, school gardens are a hot topic. And there's projects like this one, Garden to Table, where kids grow the food, cook it, eat it. And some permaculturists are working alongside local councils and influencing public policy. So, now I want to talk about one of those projects. It's a waste education project. The big picture, the end game, is resource recovery, reducing our dependence on imports and especially phosphate, capturing phosphate by hot composting food waste and regaining public ownership of the organic waste stream. That's the big picture, but there's a long way to go. And we're starting small. The short-term project is a waste education project. So we are ACSWA, which stands for Auckland Community Zero Waste Alliance. And we have negotiated with our Auckland Council to run a series of zero waste events across Auckland this summer. So it'll be a case of the community educating community. Auckland is our largest city. New Zealand has a population of 4.5 million and a third of those people live in Auckland City. Our current Auckland Council has a goal to make Auckland the world's most livable city, and they are putting in place many positive things like rail systems, and there was one policy that we at ACSWA lobbied strongly for, and it got included in the plan, and that is for Auckland to be zero waste by 2040. As I said, there's a long way to go. There are other parts of the country where they're much better at it, but in Auckland, 50% of what goes out in the rubbish to the landfill every week is food and garden waste. Pretty shocking statistic. 20% of what is thrown out is recycling, things that could be recycled. And only 30% of what's thrown out really needs to go into the landfill. So obviously, a behavioural change is needed. Currently, there is a weekly collection of recycling and rubbish, but not organic food waste. But the council wants to introduce next year a food waste collection. Of course, all of the permaculturists would never dream of putting food waste out in a food waste collection. It's all composted at home. And the council has been trying to encourage people to compost at home by offering free how to make compost courses. But it isn't working. So something else needs to be done. We need to raise awareness so that people are not mindlessly throwing stuff out, but mindfully separating their waste at home so that it is a resource that can be recovered. So we at UXWA came up with the idea of doing waste education at festivals, places where people are relaxed, having fun, perhaps they'd be more open to receiving our message. So we put together a proposal which was accepted by council, and we started last month, and this weekend just gone we had our 6th event. So, a zero waste events campaign. Much of the work is done pre-event, educating food sellers, vendors, people selling stuff. So to be able to come to some of these festivals, we are requiring people selling food to use compostable plates and cutlery. There's potato starch plates, bagasse, sugarcane plates, cardboard plates without any plastic wax lining, wooden cutlery. So that's what they have to serve their food in. At worst, recyclable, but we're trying to get everybody to use compostable packaging. Our target is 70% to 100% diversion from landfill at these events. And every person that we engage with, we're talking to and getting them to separate their waste. So we have developed these very highly visible waste education stations from recycled plastic, and you'll notice we've got green, red and orange traffic lights. Green, go ahead. Orange, careful. And red, no. So, and I think the pictures graphically demonstrate what should go into each bin. Then we have recruited and trained 15 ZWEFs. There's a lot of ZWEF and ZWIF in this zero waste work. Zero waste event facilitators, and they are our waste educators. Our next project is to recruit hundreds of volunteers to work with our ZWEFs. So it's not so easy to get people to volunteer their time to be at an event and talk with the public. So we've got a little sweetener. We're giving a donation to clubs who are fundraising. For example, it could be the Scouts, it could be a sports club who are raising money for a trip somewhere, so we're getting these groups, and if they supply us with volunteers for the day, then we make a donation to their cause. And we're thinking that that way we will be actually training a whole another group of people who will take that information home, and it's part of the behaviour changing scenario. So every person who comes to throw away something at our education stations is engaged with, and it gets pretty busy at times, and we don't take the waste off them and put it in the bins. We get them to separate it themselves, because we're wanting them to model what they're going to do at home. So as I said, we've just finished our 6th event, and we've so far been quite successful. At the end of the day, the festival day, all of the 3 streams are weighed, and so far we've had a 95% diversion from landfill. So I'm going to leave that one there, and now I want to talk about another permaculture project, another case of where permaculturists have stepped up in a crisis situation. And this one is the compost toilet project in earthquake-stricken Christchurch. So you will have heard that in 2010-2011, Christchurch suffered a devastating series of earthquakes, and much of the central city was destroyed, and the eastern suburbs were badly affected. There was a series of many, many thousands of aftershocks after the main 2 events. Water and power were obviously out, and sewage systems were severely damaged across the city. And New Zealanders, we learnt a new word. I'd never heard of it before. Liquefaction. It's when the earth goes to jelly. You can imagine what the sewage system, the broken sewage systems did. There was contaminated water and sewage everywhere, down at the seaside, in rivers. So the government's response was to send every available portaloo in the country to Christchurch, and 20,000 chemical toilets were ordered from China. It was not a good solution. It created another problem, a toxic disposal problem. What do you do with all that stuff? It's sewage, it's got all those toxic chemicals in it. It's a big problem. That's when permaculturists came up with a solution, and I'm sorry you can't read that. I'll read it out to you. A group of permaculturists went to Christchurch with a mission to grow community resilience by providing people with the knowledge, skills and materials they need to set up and manage simple and effective compost toilet systems for emergency, everyday use. This is a project that was supported by our national body, Permaculture in New Zealand. So they found that in an emergency situation, it was better to have a 2-chamber system, if possible, to separate liquids from solids. It made the disposal problem a lot easier. The solids could be further composted or returned to soil, and the liquids could be, again, put through the compost heap or disposed of to soil. They could also be further composted in wheelie bins or contained systems. By having the 2 separated, it meant that these toilets could be put into people's homes, and there was very, very minimal smell situation. So our small team went out, they held workshops, they set up compost toilets in the streets, they demonstrated them, they talked about putting in mulch to cover what you're doing. They talked about using small buckets, the materials for these toilets were readily available. Anyone could get hold of these buckets. It was a simple, easy solution. They taught people how to make them, and they set up a website, and it's still up. You can check it out. There's quite a lot of information on there about how they did this project. So, it turned out that these compost toilets were the most preferred toilet in an emergency situation. Environmentally friendly, no chemicals, no toxic spillages. The chemical toilets I mentioned earlier had to be emptied daily into large tanks that were out in the streets, and the hole where you emptied them was quite high, and obviously there were lots of spillages. It was extremely unpleasant, and it was a public health risk. So these toilets, easily put together with available materials, did not need to be emptied daily, less labour intensive, could be used in the home, public health risk reduced, and both solids and liquids could be easily disposed of to soil or compost. And just on the note of community resilience, I just put a couple of pictures in to show you how resilient Christchurch community is and how they're rebuilding their city and recovering. This is a soccer pitch in the middle of a devastated area, and they have things like this now, the pallet pavilion, pavilions built with pallets, gathering places built with pallets, and shopping malls made out of containers. So following on from that project, the same team of permaculturists took the idea to Wellington City Council, because Wellington, our capital city, sits on a fault line, and an earthquake is the danger of an earthquake is ever present. So they took their Christchurch findings to Wellington, and the emergency department part of the council was very interested. So they ran a trial in 20 Wellington homes for a month, and they found that the compost toilet was the most preferred option. So that is now in the Wellington City Council plan. Now, as permaculturists, we all know the benefits of compost toilets, of returning waste to soil, but this has been quite a breakthrough in using a crisis to get this breakthrough. So I'm going to leave it on that note and hand you over to my colleague Daniel Tohill.
Buenas tardes, everyone. We lately have been specialising in more sort of broad scale sort of systems, farms and community groups and schools, and that's what I want to sort of show you here today, a few of our examples. We also do a lot of building. We make earth bricks and we build eco cabins, small living spaces, and we build and design biological natural swimming pools. We've done about nearly 20 of them now, all over the country. Pass this on. There's a chap out there called Darren Doherty who may recognise one of the pictures on there. But I'll beg, borrow and steal anything to get the message out there. I did get permission. The first project here, this is a school. It's 99% sort of Maori and Polynesian. You didn't see a white face there. Very low socio-economic area. It's sort of what we call a Decile 1 school. I actually went to a party and I met the headmaster there, and she had just taken over the school, and she told me a story, and it was about, she said, I've got a sinking waka. You know, a waka is a traditional New Zealand canoe, and it's got holes in it, and it's a school that's sinking. It's going under. It had 20 principals in the last 18 years, and the educational institutions were looking at closing it down. And she said, we need some sort of innovation, something that's sort of more than just applying some normal strategies to what's a really abnormal sort of circumstance. And so bingo, that was a beautiful definition of permaculture. So I sat down and I started talking to her what I had seen permaculture do over the years, get people working together, caring and sharing, so looking after each other and yourself, and the nourishment of the spiritual and the mental and the physical, and just something positive to move forward to, all that sort of stuff. I sort of raved on. She said, right, let's go. And so we went out there. I initially did a plan for them, sort of an overview, showing where all the food forests and the cropping areas were going to be, and the educational areas, and etc. And then we just went mad. We got everyone. We got people. We got the mayor out. We got a local hip hop. He was the most successful advertising for us, for bringing people in. He was a local young hip hop artist, a Samoan guy, and he came and he did a song to what we're doing here, and the kids just loved him, and they just moved into it. And it was fantastic. And this was 12 years ago now, so the school has flourished. It's turned around. Parents who could afford a car here would drive right past that school and take their kids to a school right on the other side of town. But now it's a different story, and it's just growing and growing. We put all these signs out so the kids learn. The kids were initially, they were very bored. They were being given the wrong type of work for their learning needs. They were given sort of normal sort of curriculum work in the education system, and it wasn't working for them. So with the headmaster and the teachers, we started incorporating mathematics and biology and social sort of economics, cooking into this. We started breakfast clubs, we started lunch clubs, and it's just thriving. We're sort of introducing bees there, and that's the Emily Warre system. If anyone ever's heard of that, we're doing that. We built banana circles and all that, and this isn't on the school, but at the moment we're looking at doing a lot of composting toilets there, dry composting toilets. It's hard to get kids into shit. It's really hard, and to get them to sort of realise the nutrient cycle of a human and the benefits of it. So that's the next thing, and they're into it. And another really good thing here was the old swimming pool there. This is just a few things. It's not clear. The old swimming pool, it was over. It was cracked, etc. And now they build these other pools that all the kids go to. So we thought, well, let's open up a nursery. Let's get a commercial nursery going. So this nursery now makes around about $100,000 a year for the school. And they save their own seeds, and they take cuttings, and they prop it. And now the next project is actually to turn this pool, get the plants out of there, put them to the side and turn it into an aquaponics system. They're looking at eels and freshwater crayfish. So that's the next project for it. So that's pretty exciting. It's great stuff, and they're a great load. It's actually become really famous. It's had a documentary made about it. It's people have written about it. Ravina's making a short movie on it, I think, soon. This guy was amazing. He was a school bully. He was a bastard. He was a little shit. Now he's the guardian of the gardens. That's his job, and he's really great at it. When I was there, a little kid kicked the ball onto the seed bed, and he said, "Get off there!" He said, "You don't go on the seed bed." Grabbed him by the ear and pulled him away. He was great. So sorry, this is the next project. This is a sort of a broad scale real estate development, really. What I'm trying to do as a designer now is get with developers. New Zealand has a dreadful modern history of building. Materials are crap, it's insulation, ventilation, it's just horrible. And we've got big problems there with leaky houses and damp houses. And so we're trying to get with developers. We're trying to change that and make them more environmentally and sort of socially sort of aware of what they're doing. And this here, you see the encroachment. This is Auckland, our biggest city. There's huge immigration here. The city is just marching across the land, and we've got to stop it somehow. It's ridiculous. We've got to intensify or do something. And one of the efforts was the land is 45 hectares. You probably see it better there. Well, it's not a very good picture, I'm afraid. But anyway, it's a lovely topography. It's got beautiful gullies. It connects to a mother bush at the top of the right-hand side picture there. And all that watershed moves through the land, and it's beautiful. It's undulating. Now, I was at another party, and I met a town planner friend of mine, and he slapped this down in front of me. This is the piece of land. He said, "Look, this is what a surveyor's done." And surveyors aren't designers. They're not. They want an economy of straight line. That's what they want to do. They want to fit as many sections on there for the developer as possible. They were going to flatten that piece of land. Can I get closer? Sorry. They were going to flatten that land and fill in the gullies and put on something like about 380 homes. And Barry, this town planner, said, "Well, have a go. Sort of do a design and take it to the developer and see what he thinks." And this is what happens when you let two permaculturalists sort of on it. They go, they wiggle around, and we've got 390 houses on there. The old thing, if you take a curve, it creates more space. Plus, we've got 7 pocket parks. We've got 1 big cropping area and orchards, etc. All the gullies have been filled in. All these green fingers that are coming down connect up to that mother bush. We've got putting all the streets rain gardens, and they come down into the gullies and filter through that bush down into the gully and the water. It's like that sink, or source to sink scenario. By the time water comes out of here, it's clean, and we're passing it on down to the sea. There's going to be a kindergarten incorporated in this, and we've done boardwalks and cycleways, and it's great, and it's starting. It's starting, and it's starting with no earthworks or minimal earthworks, which is, I think was a great achievement. This is a broad scale development we're doing in a place called Coromandel, Waihi. It's an interesting one. It was an existing community. It's a community of Taoists from, not Vietnam, from Taiwan. And Taoism, if anyone doesn't know, that's an Eastern sort of philosophy or religion. And they called me in and said, "Look, we've got this land." They built a $45 million complex there, educational and accommodation, etc., and convention centre. $45 million. I wish I had gone there before they built this, because I could have done it for them for, $3 million. Anyway, they got us in, and they just didn't know what to do with the land. They wanted to make it an economic unit. That was the first thing. They wanted to do it for the people of New Zealand. I think it's all, I'm not quite sure who it is financed by, but I think it's all financed by guilty industrialists from Taiwan. So at least they're starting to feel guilty. That's one good step. And we, so we got together, and they were amazing. You know, sort of Taoists, they believe that, you know, the patterns, there's certain patterns in the natural world which sort of, which harmonise the universe and balance it, and you know, just create stability in the universe, and their whole inner sort of meaning to life is to have their will aligned with the natural world. And as soon as we started talking about permaculture, oh, that's permaculture, you know, and they said, look, we've had this inside internally for centuries, but we need practical models out here now. We need something external. So it was, and it's a fantastic job. We've created a village there. Sorry, you can't see, but that's a sketch at the top there, and it's down the bottom on the left-hand side. It's sort of an eco-village type structure to bring people in there, to live there. We've taken the cattle off that coastal area. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's the coast, and they had heavy animals on there. So we've taken those off. It's nothing wrong with heavy animals if they're managed properly, but here it was no good. It was no good. We get 2,000 millimetres of rain here, so it was no good. It's just too much erosion. Got them off. We've planted in natives and pockets of forestry around. We're mainly looking at Chinese medicinal herbs, growing them organically for an industry there. There's a huge Asian immigration to New Zealand, and there's a massive market for that sort of thing. And they import it all from China, and they want it organically. So, and there's some kiwi fruit orchards there, which we're keeping some and producing that organically, and then we're putting shade cloth on it, ripping out the plants and growing ginseng under it, you know, with all the companion plants. There's a good water source here, so we've got lots of water. And then we're planting a huge amount out in Manuka, because the next thing we're going to do is look at Manuka honey. It's become quite famous in New Zealand. It's got amazing medicinal sort of values. And at the moment we're just somewhere in there, which you can't really see, but we're at that stage now. We're doing experimental gardens. We're experimenting with a lot of species and creating food forests and orchards, etc. And that's me finished. Thank you.
I'll now introduce you to Robina McCurdy. Robina.
Okay, so guys. Hi, I'm Robina McCurdy, and I've been a permaculture educator and designer for the past 25 years, working in 12 different countries over this time, mostly in New Zealand. Land-based community development and transformation of school grounds is the emphasis of my permaculture work. Next. In our country of 4 million people, it's important to creatively respond to opportunities and continue working the edges to make a livelihood in permaculture. For most people, it's a subset of another school base or one of several income sources. Next. Regardless, there's a spirit of cooperation and support amongst permaculture educators and designers in our country. It's common to co-teach courses, form design teams for professional projects, like Daniel was showing, mentor emerging young teachers, and call on each area's specialist expertise. Next. Some current examples are eco-village design, ecological building construction, food forest developments, permaculture in schools, heirloom seed saving and distribution, and response to natural catastrophes. Next. I just say that each of these pictures and each of these slides is a story in its own right, and I just want to give you basically a visual taste of examples. Next. Yeah. So that's good. Permaculture is particularly embraced in earthquake-torn Christchurch City. This is what Trish showed you some images of, where appropriate technologies such as urban composting toilets have been successfully introduced, and where much of the now uninhabitable zone is becoming a large-scale food forest. Next. The dynamic grassroots organisation Project Littleton pioneers many permaculture projects in their bioregion. Did we already have that? It's okay. Recently food forests have become really popular, and a national plant species database, university level certified course and professional design body emerged out of our first national food forest convergent 2 months ago, where about 60 people came who are permaculture designers, educators from around the country, and basically spearheaded this momentum in New Zealand where food forests across from cities to urban and rural properties are just becoming like a force to be reckoned with in the nation. The Council of PINS, or Permaculture New Zealand, is elected annually at a national convergence which takes place in a different bioregion each year. It's often hosted at a Māori marae in order to embrace Māori permaculture in its development. Next. Permaculture education is met in a diversity of ways. Modular courses are popular approaches in the cities where typically a different theme is taught during a weekend each month over a year in order to cater best for local people working regular jobs. Next. In rural areas, such as where I live at Tui Community at the top of the South Island, a common approach is to hold annual residential 2 to 3 week PDCs. Our course, held every February, is underpinned by deep ecology, indigenous wisdom and community development and progressive permaculture design. So after the first day we do little designs and we build on that and all of the themes until people end up at the end of that 3 weeks as really competent to step out and design in the world. We're willing to share our curriculum, our structure and our budget with other educators in other places. Next. Many of our permaculture educators in New Zealand it's not working that slide, that's okay, next one, our approach to facilitate workshops for groups with specific needs and goals. Our charitable trust, the Institute of Earthcare Education Aotearoa, facilitates such workshops at local, national and international scales. For the past year under Earthcare, I have travelled, through the country, must press another one, through the country on a localising food tour with a small voluntary team of educators and documentary makers to empower communities and local food resilience and create a healthy community, enriching local food culture. And this was in response to decline in food security, the rising cost of food and the increase in natural disasters. Next. Yeah. Oh, next. During this tour, we offered a series of interactive workshops to develop local food resilience action plans, as well as teaching hands-on skills in each area we visited. Many local food networks were formed, thousands of homes saved, heirloom seeds were exchanged, home growers upskilled, and schools and urban properties designed as food havens. I must say that some of the slides don't come up because Mac to PC system. Keep it there. So, So on this tour, on this tour of Aotearoa, we documented 230 flourishing, remarkable food projects from which we are producing a series of educational, informative videos and YouTube clips. To discover more, visit our new website, which has been gone live 2 days ago, www.localizingfood.com. Next. Oh, that's this one, yeah. So our material is categorised into 8 main themes. I'll just skim through them. Some of the slides haven't come out. First one is Fruit and Nuts Unlimited, and we've just about finished that documentary. This focuses on fruit trees in streets, parks, heirloom species, nurseries, community food foraging initiatives, and basically how this yummy fruit salad is nourishing our nation. The next one is Growing Schools, and we're partway through doing that documentary. The trailer of those two, this and the Food Forest, is up on our website now. So this is sharing and inspiring examples of schools and kindergartens which have created edible gardens, food forests, and nature havens for whole child learning and sustenance. Next. The next one is super productive home gardens. This is stories and tips from experienced, passionate home gardeners who grow a variety of vegetables, herbs, and flowers year-round, with surplus for neighbours, friends, and local markets. They also, some of them do micro-growing, value-adding, and niche market commercial enterprises from their own homes. Next. So these are all to basically, oh, there's an example of something happening in another area. I could do like that or that part of it and take this into my locality, and we could make something collectively, whatever the person's orientation is. The next one is community gardens, and there's many of these in the country. As Trish said, she quoted 50 in Auckland. I've been working in Christchurch last year. There's 50 in Christchurch, and they're just escalating. And many councils are putting them in their policy. So these community garden documentaries show, or initiative little stories, show how a whole community can become an abundant food basket. And it's not just community gardens within the four walls or within the boundaries of a property. It's gardens on streets, it's gardens in prisons, it's gardens in marae, it's gardens in universities, it's allotment schemes, and alleyway and car park edible gardens. So it's really the whole bioregion is a food basket. Next one is rural-urban link. Rural-urban link is probably our most political. It's looking at the face of agriculture in our country, what isn't working, and what models are out there of what is working, and particularly through... Okay, cool, thanks. So I'm going to skippity-skip. Next. Wild harvest. So wild harvest shows environmentally respecting ways of harvesting food from the wilderness and oceans, including locavore initiatives, city food maps, and local gleaning co-ops. Next. Another one, let's see what happens with the slides. Next. Okay, slides didn't quite work out. So community food culture culminates that one in basically festivals and local initiatives that bring people together around the culture and celebration of food. The next one, which is this one, securing our seed sources, which is sharing examples of how global seed politics is impacting on our country and redressing that practice through home seed sowing, bioregional seed banks and seed exchanges, etc., etc. Next. So this one is the most urgent documentary we want to produce because we're losing genetic diversity of our food crops at an alarming rate, and pressure from international GE or GM companies on our government to sell out on our GA-free status is intense and commercially persuasive. The dedicated lobby group GE Free New Zealand has so far been successful in keeping this at bay. Next. So across our country, Aotearoa, we've been working actively to strengthen heirloom seed banks and seed networks in selected schools and in each bioregion. This is our trust. We're about to campaign through a crowdfunding to launch this video financially. And the last bit, I want to finish with a song from the Seed Carriers Hikoi, which was a non-violent nationwide march protesting against the then government's proposed legislation to dissolve New Zealand's GE-free status. That was in 2002. And today, all our crops produced in our country are still GMO-free, and food known to contain GMOs is not permitted within our borders. And that's vigilant grassroots action for government. So now start the slides, and I'll just knock you. So next. This is the seed, I am the seed carrier. Next. Okay. This is the garden, I am the gardener. Do you remember? Do you remember me? We are the children of the future. We have been given the seeds to hold. We are the children of the past, given the wisdom of the old. Next. Let us us remember. May we remember this.
Gonna take our time, slow down and design.